Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Today on the Focus on Why podcast, I am joined by Mark Stokes. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Amy. I really appreciate you inviting me on your great podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm very excited. So share with us what it is you do.
Yeah, well, I've done many and varied things over the years, but what I currently do, I'm a property developer. We do generally large-scale developments in the 5 to 20 million GDV range. I run an educational business which focuses on business and property development. I'm a mentor. I'm on the board of a social impact business which takes commercial property and supports the alleviation of homelessness. As well as a property investor, I'm a business investor, and I am also co-founder of SAS Alliance. And as you say, I'm sure we'll come on to that subject as well. So, yeah, I've got a lot on at the moment. I'm also an author. I'm just about to launch my fourth book, which is the first one I'll be co-authoring, and I'm halfway through my fifth book as well. So that's a bit of a 35-year itch I wanted to scratch, and making the most of it now.
So of all those roles, which one do you really enjoy?
I actually enjoy them all in different ways. I think it's easy if you say it quickly, and each one really draws out a different type of skill set. I'm pretty calm under pressure, always have been over the years, and each one throws up a different type of discipline, a different type of soul searching. I've always been a very big believer in the power of the body and the power of the mind working together, pushing myself outside of my comfort zone. And that goes back to some pretty traumatic times in my past, and really not wanting to leave anything on the table in life, to be honest, living life to full, and exploring the depth of my reserve tank. So I actually enjoy what each one brings to the table, and hopefully I'm greater than the sum of the parts as a consequence of that.
So you mentioned there the power of the body and the mind coming together. Why is that important for you to do that?
When I've been involved in ultramarathon running and ultra endurance sports for a long time now. Less so now. My joints don't really take it quite so much. But I've done some pretty extreme events, running over 100 miles in 24 hours, running across the desert with the Marathon des Sables, and many Ironman events and an ultra mountain trail running events. So I really appreciate, when you've been running for 16, 18, 20 hours, and it's the middle of the night, you're low on water, and your entire body just wants to curl up under a hedge and go to sleep. There's something that your mind can really draw on, and that power of your spirit, your mental well-being, your body, bringing all that together. There's actually nothing you can't achieve. There is no place for limiting beliefs there, as long as you can separate the two types of pain. The inconvenient, uncomfortable pains, the blisters, the toenails falling off and things. If you can combine the weight and strength of your body and the mind, it's simply amazing what can be achieved. And for me, the story goes back many, many years before that. In fact, as a very shy, very conservative young man, I was in my first year at university. I went to my first football match, which turns out to be the Hillsborough disaster. And when you see something so traumatic, when you see children draw their last breath, and 36 of those children, or 36 of the 96 that passed away on that day, they were under the age of 18. The youngest one was 10. And that really does leave something that you can never truly share with anybody, and probably nor should you. They're left for for moments of my inner self and reflection. But I vowed to myself, that day and the days after, because I couldn't comprehend what had really happened. It's very difficult to process. So it almost went in memory plus in the back of my mind, and there was no sort of PTSD or counselling really available way back then. So I just made a vow to myself that the best way I could honour those who couldn't live a life fulfilled any longer was to just give life everything, explore everything. And I've been to the bottom of the oceans, I've been to the top of the mountains, I've skydived, I've led businesses, led people, had so many privileges in life, and there are still so many more things that I want to achieve. So for me, it's a very complex equation where my life has always been about change, radical change, evolutionary change, and remaining calm and being able to draw the positives out of every situation where I can. So, quite a complex answer to a very simple question, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a feeling of the makeup of my DNA, how my life has taken a few twists and turns, and what makes me determined to achieve what I do. I think there's one philosophy there where it doesn't matter what I set out to achieve, it's already achieved. If I set a goal, it's done. I've just got to work out the mechanics. I suppose a good example is I signed up for my first Ironman many years ago now, probably about 13 years ago. And the first thing I did in the first 2 weeks was I went and swam 2.4 miles. I went and cycled 112 miles. And I then went and stumbled, crawled, and ran a marathon. And I needed to do those three individually very quickly. Didn't take any training. I just kind of did it, ground it out, and it was pretty grim. But then the whole process of my training was not building up to achieving it. I knew I could achieve it. It was about now how do I fine tune and process and become more accomplished at each one of those three disciplines and bring them together.
So do you think that if you hadn't have been to that football match, that you would have had the drive and the inclination to achieve so much more in life?
I can't really say, and I tend not to look backwards in life too much. So no, I really couldn't give an honest answer to that. All I can say is it left it seared a brand on my soul that has stayed with me for 30 odd years since that awful day. And you don't forget those sort of things that happen. You can't. Um, and I'm quite a quiet, reserved person. I guess people only know about me what I choose them to know about me, if you like. And I didn't tell a soul apart from very, very close family members up until the year I left corporate life. So, I was 45 in 2015, and I hadn't told anybody really. Maybe six or seven people knew what I'd seen that day. And I guess what I found with corporate life is it, it was almost through a cling film around me, and I couldn't truly breathe. And I've seen that a lot over the years. And I was fortunate to be quite resilient and strong, and I could put my own character and passion on my corporate role, and did. And I was very successful at that. But even though I was very confident, ran big teams, I'd be running a team of 1,000 or more very successfully. It was only when I left corporate life that I realized how much more there was to life, how much more I had to give, and how much more my soul could breathe, I guess. So that was a huge transformation for me. And I guess one of the big testaments to that is my book writing. Ever since I've held a paperback book in 8, 9, 10 years old, I'd always harboured that ambition of creating a book, of writing a book. And I've described it as my 35-year itch I wanted to scratch, because it really did take that long to have the confidence to decide, well, I am going to write a book and pick a subject and go through the process. And once I did, I just really enjoyed cultivating that style, that process. And my books tend to be they're not high level. They tend to be in a reasonable amount of detail, so people can really get stuck into the detail. Really get the fingernails into a subject. Because the type of business investing and property development we do on large scale, it tends to be the devil's in the detail. But equally, it's got to have the right mindset to adjust to taking on those huge concepts. So the book writing for me, by the end of the year, I'll have released 5 books, and I just really enjoy that process. Very cathartic.
And you talk about radical and evolutionary change, and you've been through quite a lot of transformations yourself, as you say, moving through the different areas that you're working in business. Tell us what you were doing specifically before you left the corporate world at 45.
Yeah, so when I came out of university, I was employed. I've only ever had 2 employers in my life. Probably had about 40 or 50 roles in both those organisations. But when I was an engineer, just graduated, got my first class honours degree, came out of university, or polytechnic as it was then, and I was employed as the first employee of an American organisation, a large joint venture organisation between McCourt Kiewit International. So McCourts were you probably familiar with the billionaire David
Yeah,
McCourt?
David, yeah.
So David was my first boss back in 1992. So I guess he was my first flirtation with mentorship. Incredibly powerful. I worked with him in Chicago and in London. And the joint venture between him and also Peter Kiewit and Sons. Peter Kiewit and Sons are a very substantial engineering company in the US. They're based out of Omaha, Nebraska. And in fact, they have a very famous resident in their head office, which is called Kiewit Plaza, which is the home of Berkshire Hathaway. So quite often we'd see Mr. Buffett there, and I had the pleasure in 1993 of actually having dinner with Warren Buffett, just 3 of us. Well, what a privilege that was. Shame I really didn't appreciate at the time exactly who he was, but there we go. Yeah, I was running large infrastructure projects, and these were unproven infrastructure projects. This would be where you had to go through regulatory change, where we would be structuring potentially, putting people on planes very quickly, going to far off countries, could be the Philippines, could be Japan, Hong Kong, Singapore, putting fiber optic networks in the ground, planning large blanket overlays, putting power stations, data centers, all around the world, hundreds of millions. And the very significant difference here would be this would be competitional first mover advantage. So cost was quite often less of an issue. Cash was quite often, even less of an issue at the start. It was about getting the infrastructure in place so you could actually be the first to take services to large telcos and large financial institutions. When you're dealing with the Morgan Stanleys, the JP Morgans, the Goldman Sachs, they're pretty serious client base, and they'll accept. Well, they want highly resilient infrastructure. So with power stations and data centers, the lights simply cannot go off. I mean, you can never design a system that is 100% resilient, but you can get to 99.999%, but nobody will ever accept the 0.001% at time that the lights might go out. And that would be myself and my team's job to design self-healing networks that would provide as much resilience as was feasibly possible.
And what a great mentor to be working under. And with David McCourt, his motto is always forward. And as you said earlier, you don't look back, you're always looking forward. So I'm not surprised.
Well, he was a very big disruptor. He reminded me in many respects of Richard Branson in terms of taking an existing model and really attacking it. And he did it in a real style with real passion. And it was a real privilege to work with him and such a high quality team that he drew together, and the might of Kiewit as well as McCourt. They took me to the US for almost a year, and put a solid year of investment in. But if anybody's worked with a large US organisation, they want their pound of flesh, and they're perfectly prepared to chuck you in at the deep end without life raft as well. So it came with a lot of responsibility. So from being a fairly young conservative young man, following my experiences that I mentioned earlier on, which did take a fundamental change in life, I was then presented with just an amazing opportunity to take my business career in whatever direction, at whatever speed. And I decided very early on that I would volunteer for everything, and I did. The phrase from the film Dirty Harry, why do they call you Dirty Harry? Well, any dirty job, Harry gets it. Well, I would put my hand up for anything. So, and I'm talking if there was a £20 million project that was going a bit awry and we needed somebody to go in there and turn it around, that's what I would do. I'd put my hand up. So I'd be parachuted into any type of corporate war zone, as well as having my day-to-day responsibilities. So I had to become very resilient, have a highly structured system, a great team that I think the reason why we had such a loyal team there was everybody recognized they would get opportunity. It wasn't a glass ceiling where, if I can train them to do what I do, then they'll be able to take over my role. That's exactly what it was. I wanted them to take over my role. I could then move on to the next stage. So hence I probably had 40 or 50 roles, running various countries, various structures, various acquisitions, got involved a lot in M&A, a lot of turnaround work, integration work once M&A had been done. And that old adage, every scar has a value. It doesn't matter whether you created the problem, whether you're solving the problem, or whether you're accelerating at a heady growth rate. Every type of experience leaves an imprint on you, and I just absolutely savoured that. But there came a point in my life where, when you're on the board of 7 different companies, all doing various things. I've been a non-exec director come 2015 for about 7 years as well. That you need to start looking, and probably it should have happened earlier, if I'm honest, but I needed to start looking at where my life was actually going. I'd invested in businesses then, I'd led businesses, I'd successfully sold my shares on a very successful venture back to a UK PLC. And by the time I was in my early to mid 40s, I guess a little bit belatedly, I started to realize, well, all this success was great, but, I was missing the best years of my 4 children's lives. And I'm, not too proud to say that, I reached that conclusion a little bit too late, but not irreversibly. And so I decided that I was going to leave corporate life. I decided I would leave it on my own terms, but also I'd leave as a good leaver. So when I sat down with my chief executive at that time, we formed a structure. The PLC wanted to exit certain markets. They wanted to bring on another acquisition. So there was another 6 to 9 months of turnaround work that they'd like me to do. And then for the second time in my career, because it happened in a very similar way in the first business, I was left to close down portions of companies, do the jobs nobody really wants to do, and then turn the lights out on my way out. And that's exactly what I did. It took me 7 to 9 months, long time. But in 2015, discharged myself royally from corporate life and into my entrepreneurship world now.
I'm hearing quite a few sort of army metaphors here, sort of being when you said parachuting into corporate war zone and discharging yourself. Is there a particular reason for that?
Oh, I don't know. And nobody's ever said that. I used to be in the Territorial Army in the 90s, and that was interesting for me because one thing I wasn't taxing myself on, apart from just the sheer hours I would work in terms of catching the red eye to Paris and probably hitting 3, 4, 5 other countries before I came back on a Friday night. I wasn't taxing myself physically. So mentally, I mean, I was just wired every minute of every day back in the 90s. But so I joined the TA actually, and my best man at the time, he was in 2-3 SAS, and so I was in the TA. He was in the special forces, and our house just probably looked like a battle zone, to be honest. At weekends, coming back with kit dripping wet, but I just loved the physical exertion of that, and that. Whilst I didn't do my advanced PADI and become a free fall skydiver in the forces, I think it was always taking that, living life to the full. If I wanted to do half a marathon, I'd run a marathon. If I wanted to run a marathon, I'd run 100 miles. Just taking it to the next level. And I really enjoyed seeing what the bottom of my reserve tank was. And there's a lot of positives I gained out of the discipline of being in the military. I've employed a lot of people who have been ex forces, particularly special forces. The type of discipline that the armed forces gave our business was quite incredible, and I have a huge amount of respect for the men and women of our armed forces. When you want somebody to be a corporate pathfinder, somebody who's got the initiative, wherewithal, intelligence, and acumen and self-discipline to hop on a plane with a very brief business plan and go and start to structure relationships and a business plan in country, doing something somebody has never done before. You need a certain level of trust, somebody who understands communication, who is rigid in process but flexible in approach. And I found that incredible. So I would say, any militaryisms that have come from partly my experience, but also just that intense and sheer privilege of working as part of a team and leading a team of such incredibly talented people over the years.
So, leaving in 2015, how easy was the transition?
So I recognised as I was exiting corporate life, there were a number of different trajectories I could follow. For many, jumping out of the corporate jet without a parachute, that's something that I would always advise against. But because I was so busy for that 6, 7, 8, 9 months leading up to my exit, I had little time to prepare. I've never really suffered from procrastination, but I'm also very big on due diligence as well. So it's weighing up the time that you spend with due diligence, but also just getting on with business, making a decision and going with it. I found that the repurposing of the skill sets that I had was incredibly important. But I probably overlooked initially, not for long, for a few weeks, the recognition of the skill sets that I'd actually accrued over all those years of sorting mess out and creating very successful businesses. And I think that's a stage that many people and they do leave behind. They can leave behind a whole wealth of skills that they might think isn't appropriate. And I see that particularly in property investment. A lot of people miss out those skills of running a business that they've already got and are almost chasing the ace, trying to find this new secret sauce. But actually, it's the resolute skills and mindset that they've accrued over the years, which is the incredible substance that they're looking for that can really make their car go faster, so to speak. So it's that blend for me of identifying what you really love, identifying the skills that you've got, identifying the gaps in the armory you've got, wrapping yourself around some absolutely fantastic people who you really enjoy the company of. And incidentally, I've worked a lot on joint ventures in the past, so I've got a few tales to tell on joint ventures that have not gone so well. And generally, I've been the one that's had to pull a team together to address those. But so I'm not one of those people who will see joint ventures as linking pinkies and walking into the sunset. Quite often they're misappropriated, poorly planned, in my experience. So there's a business discipline and a business skill set required. to structure those correctly. So I would implore anybody who's looking for that passage out of corporate life to really spend more time than I did just evaluating the type of skills that they've already got and which ones they love, how they can execute, and understanding a business plan that they can move forward on. I think that would pay them a handsome return.
Now, you've already hinted that there was a reason why you left the corporate world in 2015. Was it your why that made you leave?
Yeah, I think uh, it had always been centered around my children. I have four children. They were quite young at that time. Two were in the 5 to 7, and the other two were in their early teens at the time. I'd missed some pretty important times in their younger years, which I will never get back, to be honest. And I realised that would continue the more companies I became a board member of, and the more successful I was in corporate life. So I had to check my stride, and understand, well, what are you actually trying to achieve? Where is the what does great look like to me in 6 months' time, a year's time, 5 years' time, 10 years? And so that was quite a bit of soul searching there. I want my children to have a life fulfilled. I want them to live their passion, and I don't want them to be sat in a solicitor's office opening my will and seeing what their legacy looks like. I want them to actually live that legacy and become the custodians of that legacy in my lifetime. I want to be able to enjoy seeing them rise to the challenge, and actually becoming better than I ever was or I ever could be, and taking my legacy, which will be their legacy, to their next generation. So I want to be part of that, and I know people who have gone to the grave, not having the joy of seeing their children and working with their children to help shape building a business or building a passion that they desire. But I also recognise that as parents, I'm not sure I bought the copy of the parenting manual. It's difficult for all of us, but children are born creative. Sir Ken Robinson's done a great TED talk on creativity, but then society tends to beat creativity out of people, and actually that creativity should flourish. So what I do with my children is remove the traditional boundaries from them and enable them to think differently. All four of them have been shareholders in our company since the very early years of its foundation. Now, that's not because I want them to understand shareholding at their very tender age at the moment, but by the time they're 18, I want them to know more about being a shareholder than I did when I was 18. And I think that will be an incredibly powerful way of them growing up into an adult world in a responsible way, but also enabling them to understand that the life of choices isn't just in a traditional sense. There can be something different. However, if they would like to go and do different things and not mirror or decide to take our legacy forward, then that's fine by me as well. I want them to really be happy.
So I'm hearing a few words and I want to see how they sort of sit with you. You've mentioned discipline a lot. That's been a really key word for you, and passion. How do they combine?
I think they combine if you know where you're going. If you know what you're about, if you know your own DNA, if you understand what direction you want to go, and living a life fulfilled, then that will invoke every discipline, every moral fibre in your body, to be hardwired and tuned to achieving that outcome, not at the expense of other people, but in conjunction with other people. And I think that's incredibly powerful. So I think discipline has to be used carefully, because it can create a disharmony or a disrespect amongst others. I, I guess one of my strap lines is creating shared value. I want to create shared value, not at the expense of others. I've seen the construction industry around the world in so many countries work on the basis where if I want more profit, you're going to take less. But as a property developer, as an example, we're the catalyst of creating shared value. And if we can acquire something, if we can create some added value, then everybody wins. The designer gets a contract, the health and safety team get a contract, the main contractor gets a contract, society benefits from repurposing of an aging building. So creating shared value is incredibly important to me, and it underscores every single business that we have.
And you mentioned earlier, right at the beginning, about the social impact businesses that you're involved in. Tell me a bit more about that.
Yeah, so again, that's underpinned by creating an enabling shared value. So, Cornerstone Place, we look to take commercial property, transform commercial property, put some long term leases on to support charitable institutions who are best placed to provide the care for repatriating homelessness and resolving homelessness in society. It's a deep ingrained problem, but it isn't just limited to homelessness. There are so many other equally, requiring needy parts of society. And from time to time, we all need a step up. We all need a helping hand. And it's wonderful to be able to do that. Now, we're not a charity. And I think that's a classic case where you can create so much positivity, so much social impact, and creating shared value, while still bringing in investors, bringing in banks, creating that shared economic value, but leaving a sweet taste for everybody to repeat that process and create those wheels of compounding to create something that does become a truly multi generational force for good.
So you mentioned right at the beginning that when you were leaving the corporate, you felt like you couldn't breathe properly, that you had this cling film around you. How do you feel now?
I guess I'm wearing Gore-Tex, unbreathable. um, Look, I really put my own personal hallmark on every role I had in corporate life. But I think it was only after I left that I realised there was so much more to life. The amount of time I spent walking the corporate line, doing things that really I didn't want to do. They didn't add any value to my family. You will do anything to rise up the corporate ladder as long as it's morally, ethical. But if you understand what your why is, and your why, let's say in my case, is my family, and that is crystal clear, then it doesn't half add a different vein of thought to your purpose on your day to day tasks. And for me, that all changed not on the day I left corporate life, but around about 8 or 9 months before, the day I sat down with my chief exec and said, like, this is where my life's going. Now, from that point on, and we agreed very harmoniously, but from that point on, the company worked for me. They were funding my exit plan. I gave them more hours than ever I had during that next 6 to 8 months. Nobody was shortchanged in that process. But that mindset shift, something clicked, some gears started clicking in, and I was now, pursuing my next dream, if you like, my next life outside of corporate life, and literally overnight, the company were working for me and not the other way around.
So it's interesting you say that because I can't imagine that anybody doesn't have their why as being their family, not being their family. Everybody wants to provide and have an incredible life and have those moments and experiences with their family. So why is it that it has to get to a certain point in our lives that suddenly that switch flicks?
I think that's a very good question, Amy. For me, that came as a realization over many years, seeing my young family grow up and really wincing at the stages of their childhood that I was missing. I guess for many, and I've met a lot of people since. For many people, it may be they've reached that point where, as they've grown in corporate life, their cost base in their social life has increased. more expensive cars, more expensive suits, more expensive mortgage on the house, and they get on a treadmill that they're actually living a life they can't afford. And they're that one or two or three paychecks away from some serious drama. And the only way they can give themselves breathing space is not to get a second job, but is actually to to to, to almost ruthlessly pursue the next promotion. And hey, guess what? That next promotion is a good few more hours and probably more time away from the family. So it's a pretty ruthless treadmill. Um, it's one where the weak don't survive, and the strong. In as much, I came from the construction and infrastructure sector into telecoms and power stations, and it was quite a testosterone-led environment. And yeah, shall we say it wasn't one where people tended to speak openly about challenges or problems that they had. Now, I think a lot has changed over those years. I'm going back 25, 30 years now to some of those practices, but they still stay with me, and I think we're in a lot better place now as society for it.
And one of the things that you work with is the SAS Alliance. Tell us more about what SAS has done for you.
Yeah, so one of the challenges I set myself when I was leading corporate life was I wanted to be in control of my whole personal economy, everything. I simply wanted 100% resilience in my life. And whether I'll actually achieve that, I don't know. But that's the quest. So taking control, one of the big areas at the age of 45 for me was it was starting to dawn. I guess one could say that my pensions were only about a decade away, but I wanted to take control of them now. Now I'd been a loyal corporate servant. I'd put in pension contributions every year throughout my life. So I had to work pretty hard to find out what I was going to do. I researched quickly. I don't procrastinate, as I said. We did a lot of due diligence in a short period of time. Came up with SAS. I'd spent 25 years in the SAS wilderness. You could have had a SAS pension, small self-administered pension, in as early as 1973. And I know a few people now who've got family SAS pensions in their 70s. So I was late to the party, really, 2015, 2016. But that enabled us to create our own SAS pension, our investment fund. It gave us that freedom of choice to decide what we wanted to do. Now, it comes with an incredible amount of responsibility as well. So it most certainly is not for everybody. I did a lot of due diligence in order to set up our SAS. And given that at that time I was just about to release my first book, the commercial to residential conversion book, I decided that SAS pensions would be a great subject for my second book. And I can't even begin to believe I've even said those words. I've never thought, even 5 years ago, that I would choose to write a book on pensions. I'm not qualified to do so, but I put a lot of due diligence into it. So we wrote the book, or I wrote the book on SAS pensions, and then, given what we do and given what we've done with our pensions in a short period of time, and to give you an idea, we acquired one group of commercial property, and in that time, in the 25 years before, we'd created, through all of our contributions and our returns, created a certain size pension pot. In the following 12 months, we doubled that pot. And that's what just one deal had done for us. Now, we were pretty skilled at being able to do that over a 30-year corporate career, and what happened subsequently. So again, I say that with a certain degree of caution, but I just enjoyed that freedom of just being in control. And I also recognized that I was, spent many years working with highly talented people and standing on the shoulders of giants, leading large, very skilled teams. So I created SAS Alliance way back in 2017, I think it was, where I recognized that creating a group of people who come from all walks of life, all disciplines, who have a passion similar to mine, creating that freedom of choice, that they might be interested in sharing what I'd learned and likewise, and we can all grow together, creating shared value to a place where we're only competing with what we're capable of, not competing with each other. The world's big enough, and in fact, maybe we could add in something more important, and that's collaboration of ideas, maybe even further into investments. So we created that. We created a very powerful Facebook group, SAS Alliance, and we've now got many thousands of people there who many have chosen that through the right due diligence, they've decided that a SAS is right for them as well. So it just creates that wonderful group where there is a smorgasbord of experience in business and life. I can't think of any sector that isn't touched in the business world, any experience in life that isn't experienced across the group, and that creates an enormously eclectic array of skills. It's not all about one particular discipline, although many people do share a passion for property investing and developing. It's wider than that, and that's been a real joy. And some of my most privileged moments are with many of our group members who just have so much experience and wisdom. Many are in their late 30s, 40s, 50s, and therefore may well have children or families or aspiring to have families, and therefore can connect with the legacy and the custodianship part. So we've all got our own reasons, and each of our reasons are personal and unique to each and every one of us. But it's been a real privilege, and it's great to see people continue to do great things with their own SAS.
And that leads you into one of your new books.
Yes, yeah. So Louise Wright and myself, we've been busy. Louise has been doing God's own work, doing a lot of the research. So we've created a wonderful book, which is going to be coming out later in July, and that's going to be called SAS Superstars, and that's got 10 people who have done wonderful things with their SAS, actual case studies, and also drawing out the wisdom and learning, because life's not easy. And if we can sow those seeds for other people, but also give them some of that feedback needed to avoid some of the pitfalls. So it's been a wonderful experience. I know Louise has enjoyed it as much as I have, and yeah, that'll be my fourth book, co-writing it with Louise. It's been a wonderful privilege.
And your fifth book, are we allowed to hear about that one yet, or is it still under secret wraps?
Yeah, so my fifth book, by demand, actually, is about. We've got the working title. It's about property development and SAS. If you think of all the individual strategies you can have investing in business and investing in property, and then bringing in the power of a small self-administered pension, just bringing that together. Lots of case studies and detail. Yeah, that's a real piece of work, that is. So that will be my summer's work. We're just doing the front cover at the moment. So that will be later on in autumn 2020.
And I think we forgot number three, which was advice to a younger self, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. So again, that passion for creating that support and enablement for our next generation. Now, I'm pretty humble guy. I'm confident and driven, but humble as well. I know where there are others that can help me and help others better than I can. So I reached out to 48 other people who I know, and we all decided to write a chapter each. And I drew this book together, and the concept is, to take yourself back to when you were 12, 14, 16. If somebody, given all your experience now, if somebody had put their arm around you and given you just one, maybe two or three pieces of advice, what do you wish they were? And again, across 48 plus myself, so 49 chapters, when you look at the twists and turns through business and life that all 49 of us have taken and the learnings, it's an incredible, powerful book. and the proceeds are all going to charity between British Heart Foundation and B1G1. So they'll be recycled, regenerated, and reinvested in as a force for good, a real momentum there. So it's a great present for the ones that you love, and even just one or two nuggets there. And unlike most books, it's a book that you can just dip in and dip out. It takes 10, 15, 20 minutes to read a chapter. You don't have to read the chapters in order because it's alphabetical order. So that was a very, very different book. And it also created a lot of opportunity for all 49 of us. I learned how to work for the first time with people as co-authors of the book, of chapters of the book. And most of those 48 people had never put pen to paper to write a book or part of a book. So they took themselves through some pretty tough times to create each a very polished chapter. So I think everybody learned in the process, and that's the kind of wheels of evolution turning for all of us. So the power of the book started in its creation as well as what it stands for to those that choose to read it.
So, what's next for Mark Stokes?
Well, we're certainly going to take the social impact business to the next level. SAS Alliance, we've just released our new membership, which is fantastic. Our education business goes from strength to strength. Our property development company is starting to take on larger developments through what is some interesting times. We've got some pretty choppy water during 2020. Business investments, I monitor my business investments, always looking for other opportunities. But the thing I love, and I spend quite a proportion of my time, is helping other people. I mentor people. I love that with a passion. I've done that for 25 years now, helping to draw out the very best attributes out of people, and hopefully, drawing a sense of clarity for them, so they've got that purpose of mind and of action. And last but not least, it's spending that really desirable time with my family. My children are growing up rapidly now. They make me prouder and prouder as the days go by, and I really enjoy that. So, yeah, that's me. I think in time we'll travel the world as the children get older. My wife and I, we're coming up for our 22nd wedding anniversary. So, yeah, good times.
Amazing. Well, I can't say thank you enough for coming on the show and sharing your journey. And some of it's been traumatic. And, thank you for sharing that, because I know that a lot of people will hear that and that experience and will resonate with it, about how for them there have been moments in their lives that have also been pivotal. But it's just been such a pleasure to hear what you're up to, what you've done. And yeah, well done on all the ultra marathons and all the business. It's just incredible, really inspiring.
Thank you very much, Amy.
And have you got one final message for the audience, please?
I'd leave you with a piece of advice that many who know me will have heard before, but it was a piece of advice that one of my first managing directors gave me way back in the 90s. And it was advice that was to lead me to doing many, many high level corporate negotiations, and really trying to find that common ground and create that shared value. And that's walk a mile in another person's shoes. Now, to me, that has been incredibly powerful in striking the balance and creating that shared value. And sometimes there's an old corporate game called the Ugly Orange, where two teams compete for the global supply of oranges, and it's a corporate game. You might have an away day, and the moral of the story at the end of it is you both outcompete each other, and the price of oranges goes through the roof. But when you do the debrief, one company wanted the pith, and the other company wanted the juice, and they were competing needlessly. And there will be competition in life, but quite often it isn't as overt as you think it is. Quite often, when you look under the bonnet, you'll actually find that collaboration will exceed and outstrip competition many, many times over. And we've seen that in how our businesses have grown over the years. So, walk a mile in another person's shoes, understand what great looks like to them. And quite often there's some quite remarkable things that can happen. So that would be my final parting shot of advice.
Thank you for listening to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson, and if you've enjoyed this episode, please leave me a 5-star Apple Podcast review. Connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram and Facebook, and become a member of my inspiring, uplifting and positive Focus on Why Facebook group. I help people to focus on their why with clarity, uniting their passion with their purpose with a plan to create the life they truly desire. If you would like me to help you focus on your why, then please book a free 20-minute coaching call via calendly.com/Amy Rowlandson. And if you haven't already, please sign up for the Friday Focus weekly newsletter via my website, amyrowlandson.com. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.